Yeah, Paul, nice to meet you, Desertec. The questions I have is you outlined before that it's much easier today to develop large renewable energy projects, wind and solar, in the Middle East and Northern Africa, because costs have been going down so much. How do we get this fantastically cheap power to Europe? Isn't that a question of infrastructure now?
Well, I would first ask a question to you. Why should it be first be transferred to Europe? I think the most important thing, also the learning of Desertec, is actually that we should first take care that the energy supply locally is emission-free. Of course, then at some point in time, the region is also able and willing and to its own benefit to export to the whole world. And exporting, there we have now all the options that you can imagine, like electrical infrastructures, power lines and cables can all be done and is being built now. But also on the molecular side, via hydrogen, green hydrogen, especially green. In principle also blue, that you capture the CO2. There you have the gas infrastructure that's already prepared, I would say, for this partly, and by boat, ship and truck and so on. So there's, like we know from the old gas and coal and oil worlds, that can be transferred into a green world.
Yeah, interestingly, we have these power lines and also the gas pipelines, as you mentioned. We have them, from Morocco to Spain. We also have them from Tunisia to Sicily, to Italy. In my understanding is that pipelines are way more efficient to transport hydrogen than producing electricity and then making hydrogen later on down in Europe. So. And hydrogen pipeline seems to be much cheaper than shipping that hydrogen in ships. So wouldn't it make sense to basically use existing gas infrastructure for cheap hydrogen out of the desert, or even build additional infrastructure so that Europe is not entirely dependent on gas from Russia, but that we get the new gas, hydrogen, especially from a second source, which obviously could be Northern Africa. What's your thought on hydrogen pipelines to Europe to basically have a second angle for European energy security?
Yeah, I think there are many levels here. The first, the low-hanging fruit is to use the existing gas infrastructure and to mix with green hydrogen. You can do that today. And there are already places where you have this trend. Like in Netherlands, then you can build new infrastructure dedicated to hydrogen. You can also upgrade hydrogen to other molecules like ammonia or methanol, but then on a green basis. So that is something what the market and the infrastructure builders have to deal with. It's an economic matter. The most important question is what is the price difference between the source of energy? I would say the green energy, because if the source is predominantly fossil, you should not tap from that source, but first make sure that it becomes green or emission-free. And then you can see in the world, like we see with LNG today, it's like Qatar is the cheap place, and they transport this to Japan and to Europe, where the prices are much higher, and today very, very high. And if these price differences are very long, very large, and very structural, that will then lead to investments in infrastructure.
In terms of timing, if we look at the year 2030, and we know a lot of things have to change in this decade, especially on the industry side. How many gigawatts of solar can you see in the desert in Northern Africa and Middle East to supply hydrogen for Europe? What's your estimate?
Well, I have learned in after 40 years of experience in the industry, where I was always called an optimist, how optimistic I would be today, I could almost say it will be better in 10 years. Because we cannot imagine today how fast these developments can go. Solar and wind cost almost nothing today. And we are not at the end. And the deserts have the place. These days also, which is very important, the people in these countries, they are accepting this. They embrace this technology. And the investments are there because they don't have to invest in fossil infrastructure. Only a fraction of that money can be taken for the renewables. So this can go very fast, and it will go very fast, but I don't know how fast.
Do you think that's a whole European industry that needs hydrogen, so especially the chemical industry, steel, green steel making and so on? Do you think that that can all be done with hydrogen from Northern Africa within the next 10 years?
Yeah, well, theoretically, yes, and there are models, you may know them. There are a lot of, and we have worked with Fraunhofer and with other institutes, and also with a university in Finland, that show that this can be done. But you always see with these models, that's not the way it will go, because there are so many other factors. And we work with people, with nations, with all kind of interest groups and vested interests, and a lot of misunderstandings, and also a lot of fake information around the subject. And we have to deal with this. But the pure fact that emission-free energy becomes so extremely cheap, that already it gives you the guarantee, I would say, that it will push in that direction.
So the bottleneck really for the European industry to get cheap hydrogen from those regions, the bottleneck really is the infrastructure, the pipelines. It's not the solar projects anymore. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's not only the pipelines. It is, of course, the infrastructure is a large cost factor. It is, I would say, first of all, the energy transition in the region of the source itself. If there is no energy transition and the region would substitute the grain that transports 2,000 kilometers away with fossil, that would not be really the right thing to do. Yeah, so we should be sure that does not take place. So that's, I would say, the first issue. And then it will be also the cost level. And if there are, the transport cost, especially at the beginning, you need a large investment in transport. If that is too large a hurdle, then local solutions may prevail. Also, solutions at the demand side. Why should an energy-intensive industry sit in a region that has no energy? So these questions come up.
Very interesting, very interesting. So last question to the electricity. It's again an infrastructure question. So with wind and solar being relatively easily done by local governments themselves and respective companies behind it, isn't electricity transport to Europe? Isn't that again a bottleneck on the infrastructure? Like the connectors to Spain, the connectors to Italy, maybe even to France via Corsica and those regions. Thinking big.
If you look at the total picture, it's evident that the molecule transport is much cheaper and it's faster. You can build it faster, in principle, and so that will happen. But there will always be a role for the electrical systems, because what you see in all continents is that the electrical systems, they will be connected and they grow and grow, because there is a large part of society is electrical. But electrical is not the first priority on long distance transport, of course not. But it will be a part of long-term issues between continents.
So my last question to you is, if we have this cheap solar, in Northern Africa, and there isn't that much of a difference in Southern Europe. You see a better chance for European Desertec-like projects, Southern Spain, Southern Italy, Greece, Turkey.
Yeah, of course, everyone, but also in Germany and all of the world, everyone has chances at local level. I would say the priority should always be at local level, at your home, at your roof. Be sure that you take the chances. That's the cheapest because they have no transmission costs, and you can do it alone, and it is so much easier. So do it. And it is not one or the other. It is together.
That's an interesting point. Maybe another quick question here. So at the local level, so the solar roofs, do you think there would be a chance for job creation in Northern Africa if we do this locally, like everybody can participate in those gains, in the event that Europe, for example, would pay a little bit more for community energy compared to the large-scale projects? Do you think that these kind of tariff differences would enable jobs in Northern Africa?
Yeah, I would hope so, and that's also one of the learnings in this Desertec, because Desertec and Desertec was more an extrapolation of the old thinking from power generation, transmission to the demand side. But what we see in the whole energy transition is that the demand side is where it starts. First of all, more efficient, effective, and so on. It's a better and more flexible demand. But also energy production at the demand side. And the same should happen in all over the world, also in the deserts, of course. And in the desert, we see now in the last few years a trend while these PV panels are so cheap. It costs almost nothing. So you see all kind of people that have no electrical connections or no access to big grids. They move into decentralized solutions. And that's the right thing to do. I would say it's not only the production itself, but also storage technologies. So batteries and the flexibility of demand. So shifting demand is the cheapest flexibility you have in the system.
Yeah, interesting. So in Spain, they had a program at once of the solar garden. So everybody could get 10 kilowatts in his garden and then sell the power at respective rates.
But then later on, the minister in 2012, he turned it down, you remember. Yeah. Was it a question to me? Yeah. Yeah.
No, you get
good journalist as well.
No, you get the medallion.
Famous medallion. Yeah.
Okay, Paul, nice meeting you here. It's very fascinating to see your experience with Desertec and how this can be transforming European industries and also the industries in their own countries and the energy supply. So we have had issues in Germany especially with a myth, and the myth was that renewable energy is expensive, the energy transition is expensive, which since 2017 is not true anymore, but it has not really been communicated in the mass media and not in politics. So we have created a symbol that symbolizes the cheap energy transition in Germany that we see since 2017, and that's data from the Bundesnetzagentur. So we have created a climate medal. So on the first side of the medal, you basically see the world or tree, which symbolizes Klimaschutz, climate protection. And the big question is, what's on the other side? What does it cost? And we'd like to bring this into schools with Teachers for Future and others. And kids can then cut it out of paper like a medal. And again, on the first side, paint a world or a tree. And on the second side, they can basically put a sun, and the result is, it's cheaper to do it, and that's whoever understands that can get this medal. So I'm going to ask you, is solar energy and wind cheaper than fossil fuels?
Well, in any case, especially if we calculate the effect of fossil fuels, but even without calculating the effects, it's much cheaper.
So you will be awarded the climate medal then, because you've answered the question correctly.
Thank you very much.
And you're one of many other medal holders like Annalena Baerbock, I've explained it to Olaf Scholz, and I've explained it to many others.
Well, it's a big honor to become this medal and also to answer the question right. It's really great because that's all we need to know.
Okay, thank you very much.